ladies and gentlemen, it was about the radio source, it was about the modulator, so now it's time to demodulate everything and put the story into the end and to logical conclusions. My name is Krzysztof Kanawka. I represent a Polish company named Blue Dot Solutions. Blue Dot is planet Earth, and everything that we are talking here about is about our planet Earth, where we would like to do and serve and provide something meaningful. And this is practically that thing. The receiver, the demodulator that we have created, we named in a very cosmic way named Plutonic, and it's about continuous synchronization and resilience for signals. Our company mostly works from the perspective of GPS and GNSS, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of talks about potential alternatives to PMT signals provided by GPS and GNSS satellites. So this is one of the tiny things where we could think something could be done. What we have done here, I have two samples of the device with me, was done recently under European Space Agency project under contract under Spark funding team. It means that in a very short time, like 6, 9, 12 months, you can create a prototype, test it, and provide some results to the European Space Agency, who is super keen to work also on alternatives to what might be in space, just to properly provide various different techniques and technologies which could be useful for different means. Okay, so first of all, the Plutonic device is, in this particular case, was based on one of the SPIC processors, together with LoRaWAN communication, because we wanted to prove that it works on a wide range, of a wide area of things. On the right side you can see the most typical ferret antenna, which is quite common for such applications. And we had something super space inside. We were able to secure a contract with a company from Hungary that made a dosimeter for radiation. And during recent space flight of Apollo, Mr. Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, who flew to the space station, there was also a Hungarian astronaut, and he tested on board ISS rad nano dosimeters, also for conditions on space. And we were able to secure one of the first batches of that dosimeter to test it on Earth. So we wanted to combine the modulator that we created with LoRaWAN and with dosimeter for radiation. All of those things I will explain to you later as one of the use cases why it could be useful. Nevertheless, it was a nice combination of those activities. For those of you who are using TRL scale, at this moment we are at TRL7. We have tested, demonstrated this in operational environment quite across Poland and part of Europe, and we want to move it further and to do some of the applications, some of those applications. And then one of the things is that we are right now talking about quite specific thing, which typically most of people do not see as super relevant until the moment it really hurts them. So we did a lot of studies trying to understand how much does it, how important it is to check and to use such devices in some mass production activities. And then, first of all, when we talk about time precision, time synchronization, typically most of industries think about something super precise. Like, for example, electricity grid synchronization, which is super important. Financial activities, again, something super important. This is way beyond the capabilities of this system that we have created, this receiver that we have created. Nevertheless, there's a growing number of devices that just need information about time, and they need to have a secure information about time that it really works there. Think about something that is moving. It doesn't matter if it's super precise or it's 0.1 second, for example, of precision, but if it is the same source, and you can be totally sure that your information is synchronized or takes time from the same source, it starts to be useful. And then such devices are of course everywhere. And then one of the recent problems right now that is being seen when it comes to use of timing sources is that you either use something that you really personally do not understand it because we are just simply very used to such a source, or you have no idea how to secure such information. So An alternative, as you see, is a solid Swiaski radio transmitter at 225 kHz with various different ranges depending on the power of the antenna that you can work. But definitely, it covers part of Europe, including, of course, Poland, including part of Czechia, Southern Europe. Also, it might extend even to the Mediterranean Sea, depending on how big antenna you would have and how good you would in this case. And there's a question about, in this particular case, what happens when your device does not have access to time. Now this is the moment when the magic starts. First of all, we noticed at the top of recently we have quite a number of different users who say that, well, in some cases, the services, the activities that they do might stop working. Or because simply they do not have information about time, so they cannot sometimes initiate and then they cannot provide proper information. Or, in some cases, there will be problem of data collection. I will provide you a very scientific example that is very common. I recently talked with one scientific institute that takes data about current sea conditions from the buoys on the sea, and they try to combine it. And of course, because of recent GNSS incidents of signal interference and then lack of access to time, they have trouble to guess when exactly, for example, something happened that it was recorded by this buoy, because they cannot trust their own source of GNSS signal, of the source of GNSS time, which is a big problem for them. So then, from that perspective, they have quite a lot of very manual and very difficult work trying to guess when did it happen and trying to synchronize information from different devices. As simple as it is. They do not know whether one of those buoys, for example, worked properly and the other one, they probably are quite aware that it was not working properly. So there's a question how to combine that data. So they can, for example, provide scientific information about state in which right now the sea is located. And then the sea is executing. So it means that they can be off by minutes, hours, they really do not know. This means a lot of manual work for them, which might be very difficult to be done. This is just one scientific example of what could happen. Think about something like this happening on the industrial side. Think about, for example, someone providing or traveling with medicaments, for example. You would like to have information about that, for example, your medicaments are stored in the proper time, in the proper conditions all of the time, and you would like to have it. And then sometimes it starts to be a problem. There's a question that also, if you exchange your data with someone else, it's not always so easy to accept that data. And some of those people with whom we talk, they already investigated. They already claimed that there is such a problem. However, this is a very strange and fun situation that you might see. Although lots of systems right now use time from some kind of service. Think about anything mobile that works there. Most of the users, over half of them that we have reviewed and with whom we talk, do not use any secondary source of time. Which means that, for example, if you are based only on GPS or GNSS receivers, and you start to have problems because of interferences with that signal, there's a question of what will happen next. Some people might be aware of it, but then, apart from that, there's no answer about that. Now we see that there starts to be a use case, for example, for a secondary source of that. And then there's also a question about general cybersecurity of such things. For example, what happens during, you can call it a cold start of a device, server, or suite of sensors, for example, that has to gather all the information from somewhere else. For example, if you turn on your computer, where it was not used, and some of the remote infrastructure things can sometimes be used in such a way, it does not have any information about time, or it might have improper information about time, because, well, the time that was stored on board simply has shifted. It has to synchronize with something. And then you have a problem with access to a proper time. It is a place where potential cyber attack can happen. And there are some types of attacks that could happen in such a case. So, and on top of that, although it seems quite logical, all of us are using time services for lots of different activities. French railways asynchronized to a very similar system that is introduced by the French government, and not GNSS. Very simple, very interesting situation. When it comes to synchronization based on any GSM networks, there's always a question about availability and question about what is exactly the cost, for example, of running such a system and being able to use it, especially when you have, for example, 1 million devices, which could happen in some cases. So in that, in fact, there's a lot of things. And then this is where we are coming on, to the main part of our research. Our company mostly works in GNSS and GPS activity, especially on the receiver side, especially on the transformation of the data, and especially on the urban conditions when it comes to GNSS. And of course, for decades, GNSS receivers were a very popular source of time. It was very easy to use it. You have a receiver that you can buy from everywhere. You don't have to have a very complex equipment. You can install it everywhere, and it works, or it used to work. And now starts to be a problem because lots of things that are simpler, that remote, for example, where it's not so easy to put some additional equipment, then they sometimes start to suffer from problems. For example, such as the recent rising threat from GNSS interferences. We have two types of GNSS interferences. One of them is just jamming, so that your signal is simply not available. But the other one is spoofing, where on some kind of a purpose, someone deliberately tries to change the signal and acts as a kind of an attack. For example, one of the very simple types of spoofing attack is called retransmission. So someone, as simplified as it is, tries to record the signal and then replace it at much stronger thing. And for example, if your device at that moment is restarting, obviously it will start listening to that retransmitted signal. The time, for example, or the position of it might be different. And this is what we see right now, for example, in case of very strong jamming incidents that are coming from Russia, not that far away from Poland. I also personally feel that it is not the only source of jamming in our region, because quite a lot of incidents of jamming are being noted, for example, across the Baltic Sea. Which means that in some cases it might be simply too far away from the crew limits area where the jamming might be there. So there's a question about it. And of course, it is one of the problems. And the second problem with GNSS networks, which is magically solved very quickly by the signal from the Polish radio, is the ability to work inside buildings and underground. For example, if you drive with your vehicle underground into the underground parking, of course you are going to lose your GPS signal. But in the future, think about autonomous vehicles that would, for example, provide some cargo from one place to the other. It's quite logical that some of those places will be underground. It will be in the underground parkings, and then, for example, some cargo will be stored or moved from one vehicle to the other one, and you would like to have information about this. So then, magically, the signal from the Polish radio starts to have sense, starts to be quite important on that side. So, we did some studies about how useful it might be, and we checked some of the reports, including the Główny Urząd Miar report from, as far as I remember, 2019. And it looks as if there are, right now, in our region, there might be up to 1 million devices already that need to have some relatively simple synchronization or access to time of some sort. I'm not talking about very precise devices. I'm talking about some simpler devices that would like to know what the time is. Sometimes time and position what it is, but most of the time, some timing services should be there. And then, what is quite interesting is to know that most of those reports right now are relatively obsolete. They do not talk about IoT devices. They do not reflect, for example, the increasing number of automatic and autonomous activities, mobility, and some of such things. So, for example, industrial activities that are more and more automated, for example. Some of those things are not there. So, as you can imagine, there is already you can expect that there's already a much higher number of potential devices that could benefit from that part. So, in our project, what we decided to do was that in August last year we were at TR5, so we had a prototype that was working in relevant environment, but that was it. So we wanted to create a batch of devices. We wanted to check it. We wanted to put it in different parts of the country just to prove that it works. Also outside of the country. Also, we are able to incorporate the radiation dosimeter that was designed for satellites, but it was one of the first examples of this device, of this radiation dosimeter being used down on Earth. So, what we did, first of all, we verified that it works quite across Poland. We also had a number of devices that were working in Czechia, so obviously it was within the range of the Polish radio 225 kHz, and it was working nicely. We did a number of radiation tests. I'm going to show you some results in a moment. And we talked with some potential producers from different industries. For example, producers of servers, who, of course, they sometimes, from time to time, they reboot, or sometimes they are not being used, and they simply need an information of time. And some of the services nowadays, use GNSS services. This is one of the examples. In May, we went to Institute of Physics in Krakow, of radiation physics, nuclear physics in Krakow, and we did a number of tests with cobalt-60 radiation source. And as you can see, it's recorded it, and of course sent the information to do with timestamps to some sources to our server, which was super nice because we could both measure the total cost that, for example, the sensor has got at this moment. And believe me or not, as you can imagine, it was super little. That amount of radiation was little, and no human was harmed here in this case. But the radiation sensor really measured those values. But also, we were able to measure the intensity. So, like at that amount of time, what was the amount of radiation that came? Not the total dose, but just that amount of time. And that was interesting, because another interesting use case for such a device is related to civilian radiation sources. I'm just giving to you a very, very specific, narrow, niche use case, but you can think about this, that every such case has some limits, has some specifics of its own market. And it's nice to see that. Last year, in the beginning of last year, a radiation source was lost in Krakow. It was a civilian radiation source used for defectoscopy of buildings. So of course, when some construction is being done, you put some X-rays through the building, through the wall, for example, then you see if it's created properly. And of course, if you use it as a professional, nothing bad will happen. But let's say that together we find something nice and shiny and interesting. So some people in Poland and all across European countries love to dismantle it and love to see what's inside. And of course, suddenly it starts to be dangerous. So what about having such a sensor to do with time that will tell you that no matter if it's underground, if it's inside of a building, if it's in the open sea, if it's simply within the area, if it tells you that at this time, let's say at 5:30 p.m., everything was okay. But starting from, let's say, 5:45, you could measure a spike of radiation, and then you know, obviously, that from that moment, no matter if it's underground, inside of the building, and so on, the radiation source, for example, was active, was open, and was already a danger to everyone around. So, if that radiation source was stolen the day before, and you knew that starting from 5 p.m., for example, the radiation started to be released, you know already that you have to change the way you are looking for such things, and of course you know that it's already dangerous. It's super important. Sometimes such information can completely shape the way you are looking for something, you are managing something, and that you are taking control over something. So such a device might be there. This is one of our work for the future, just to think about a very specific niche where additional sensor provides the information, and then that information might be critical for that part of the industry. So as you can imagine, this is super important, and so far we have not seen any such activities. So with that, we want to produce early batch for interested individuals. We want to see various different sensors which might be useful. Radiation source is just one of the examples that it could work in this case, and in some specific niches it could be interesting. Might be some other things might be interesting. For example, if you could imagine that, for example, you could see how good, how, for example, something propagates over the time. Let's say a wind, for example, a windstorm, for example, propagates. So it could be a completely different sensor, and then with timestamps, it could be interesting. We would like to investigate different applications, and we would like to conduct the next project that would extend the range of this device, possibly also discuss the authentication methods and see what could be useful in this case. And then it was supposed to be a logo of Nokia company here, but of course I cannot use such a thing without mention, so I'm just going to say connecting people in this case, so to discuss with people what exactly and where it could be done. Nevertheless, we definitely see a huge potential in this device, and I'm looking forward to the application. So now, if you would like to have access to such a device, this is a scan to a form where you could declare your interest, and we'll simply come back to you with such information, and then we'll see what exactly could be done. So I'm just going to leave it for some time. We have 2 samples from that project right now available, so I can show them to you and present it. We think that simply the future version will be much simplified, so that they will be very quickly integrated and you could use it for various different things. It's going to be quite plug and play thing, with the various different options to exit the device. Okay, and with that on, I'm ready to answer to your question. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. I'm also terribly sorry, apart from me, instead of me, well, there was supposed to be Tomasz Bro here today, but from what I understand, he's very, very unavailable right now, and I'm wishing him all the best health as soon as possible. Thank you very much.